Pakistan is changing in terms of where Pakistanis live, where they can make money,
Yeah.
what money making options and making a living options sort of exist for people. But how do you have like an image of what Pakistan was like at the start? उस वक्त
Sure.
क्या
I mean,
situation थी?
there's this so as far as images and visuals are concerned, there's these borderline orientalist slash racist
Of
videos that
course.
the British Film Institute
Yeah.
uploaded
Yeah.
a while back about life in the subcontinent during the 1940s and 1950s. And they're very heavily sort of, I guess, shaped and influenced by Joseph anthropology and this
Yeah.
idea
Yeah.
of village life.
Yeah.
But there is a kernel of truth to it, right? I mean,
Sure.
if we were to say that there is such a thing as a median Pakistani or an average Pakistani, the average Pakistani was rural, was engaged in farm work. So back in 1951, which is when the first census happened in Pakistan after independence, about 17% of the population lived in areas that were classified as urban. We're talking about
17.
towns. 17, 1 7.
Okay.
Okay, so towns and cities and so places like Lahore, Karachi, and so on. And even that was largely because of the influx of post-partition refugees, right? So this is actually pretty mind-blowing statistic that in the city of Lahore in 1951, 43% of the population of that city was actually a migrant from India.
Right.
So just within the city itself, 43%. Karachi it was about 55%. But Faisalabad, which is not something that you think about, or is not a place that there are very few reasons to think about Faisalabad. But no offense to your Faisalabad.
Recently, there is a reason on Twitter to think about Faisalabad.
Yeah. The father, whatever that cricket name is, but for me, the Faisalabad statistic is actually sort of is mind blowing. But 70% of Faisalabad's population came from what is now India. Okay,
Wow.
so this is in 1951, right? And so whatever urban population that did exist was majority, or if not more, slightly more than the majority, was all partition migrants.
Right.
But the vast majority of the country, about 83% of the country, lived in rural areas. Right? They lived in places that were classified as villages. They did farm-related work.
Yeah.
And so if you take this forward by another 10, 12 years, so 1963, about 61% of the working population in the country actually was directly engaged in agriculture. So they were working on farms. That's
Okay.
that's the statistic that we have. I guess that really demonstrates that Pakistan was by and large a rural country. Most people, did not have access to education, healthcare. Most people did not have access to metal roads. They did not have access to, attached washrooms or toilet facilities in general. And so I think that's the baseline that we're essentially working from in 75 years since.
Achha, so we have a picture then of the 50s, the early 50s and the 60s, of most of the country, like a huge majority of the country not being urban. And jo urban hain bhi, a huge majority of them are migrants from India.
Yeah.
So let's jump all the way forward. How do things look now?
So now it's a completely different context altogether, right? So in 2017, the official population for the official urban population as a percentage of the total population was around 37%.
Oh, sure.
So it's about 20% higher than what it was back in 1951. But there's severe undercounting happening because the criteria what we use to define urban is an administrative criteria. Right. So essentially what we're saying is that if a particular place is labeled as urban, its population will be counted as urban. Everything else that may look like a city, walks like a city, talks like a city, but isn't officially categorized as a city, uski population jo urban nahi count hogi. Right. So it's a purely arbitrary, babu-ridden sort of criteria that we've developed. But there's a researcher based in Lahore called Raza Ali. He works on urban related issues. He estimates that it could be as high as 50%. So Pakistan's population is, if we just go by urban characteristics, having access to metal roads, having access to education centers, having access to healthcare, being very close to areas where agriculture is not the main form of employment, that percentage of the population could be as high as 50 to 60%.
And this is also taking into account how much the population has grown since.
Exactly.
Right.
So just the absolute numbers mein to baat तो we're like, there are more people living in urban areas now in Pakistan than there were people in Pakistan in 1951.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. And is it working out for people who are moving to cities, or are they just moving to cities to be poor? Because
that's the big question, right? I think it's I think jury's out to a large extent, but I think what we're basically seeing is that people are that it's very difficult. That it's that even making like if you're an asset poor household, moving from a rural area to an urban area,
what does asset poor
making
mean?
it asset poor meaning that you don't have a lot of generational wealth, you don't have land, for example, you don't own any assets like livestock or land or anything of that sort. Moving to an urban area, making it is difficult. You're and a large part. Okay, so here's an easier way of thinking about it. So पहले 18% लोग रहते थे रूरल एरियाज में, अब 37% और अप टू 50% रहते हैं. पहले 60% लोग एग्रीकल्चर में काम करते थे, अब को about 35-36% करते हैं. What are the rest doing? So the sectors that have absorbed the greatest amount of labor are wholesale and retail trade.
Right.
So like shopkeeping, essentially small scale businesses, construction work. So working as day laborers, which is predominantly where most poor rural migrants actually end up being end up finding work. Manufacturing, to a certain extent, about 15% of Pakistan's population works in manufacturing. So factory jobs, which are usually better paying, have greater benefits associated with them, they're not available to everyone.
Sure.
And then the rest are like really low, what we sort of quote unquote call low skilled labor, right? Which is essentially a lot of time intensive labor, such as, working as domestic help and working as cleaners or things like that. So a lot of that is where most rural migrants end up being. And these aren't stable jobs. They don't offer, retirement benefits. They don't offer other health insurance or any of those benefits that are associated with urban employment in general.
Yeah.
And so it's not, they don't really offer like a great pathway towards what we call social mobility. It's not like you move to the city and now your family in a couple of generations is going to make it. It's not as clear cut.
Yeah.
But then you have to imagine how bad things are going to be in those rural areas that people are still feel compelled that they have to move to a city.